It's just, it's just.
This is the OGM weekly call for Thursday, November 6th, 2025. And we're talking about switching from left-hand drive to right-hand drive. Whoops. And inconveniently, I was just receiving a call, which I declined.
Actually, it's about driving on the left side of the road to driving on the right side of the road.
Thank you. Yeah, I was trying.
Drive, and left-hand drive is the reverse thing. It's where the wheel is.
And left-hand drive, right? Exactly. And I can anybody Google whether other countries have done this besides Sweden, or even Claude or
Iceland,
somebody else?
Nigeria, Ghana, Saudi Arabia, Yemen.
I mean, there were so many.
Pete, did those all do it overnight? Implies a level of coordination that's probably rare.
I haven't quite got to how fast it was, but it was pretty fast. Yeah.
You kind of have to do it. You have to do it all at once. Go ahead, Alex.
Yeah.
The main reason was it was the British Empire, and they drove on the left. So why did the US go to the right from the start? They were supposedly a colony.
It's whether you descend from England or Germany. So the Germans were on the right.
So was there a time where the different states in the US, the carriages were driving in the different side?
That's a good question.
A good question. We could look this up. And I seem to remember that at one point, left or right-hand drive had to do with which hand was free when you were in the carriage with horses. And so most people are right-handed, so you wanted to be able to use your right hand defensively. I have no idea, but I think that has something to do with it.
I heard that it stems from tournaments, from knights tournaments,
from jousting.
Right hand free for your jousting tournaments, where your right hand free for your weapon, but that may be totally crap. I don't know.
Yeah. So here we go. We have our amateur historical theories to warm up our space.
I think another one is what side of the ship you unload.
Well, that's port and starboard.
But I think that descended, or it.
You think it's connected?
Yeah.
Oh, now I'm latigo is a whip, Victoria. Briefly, before they invented the rudder at the stern of the ship, there were steer boards, and this is the origin of the words cyborg, because it was actually more interestingly perhaps, the steer board, because most people were right-handed, was usually on the right side of your ship, and you didn't want to damage the steer board when you docked, so you would put the port on the port side, and that's why we have steerboard and port, which became port and starboard.
Oh, right.
Yeah. So that's why it's the port. The port was always on your left.
I'm so glad I come to OGM. I learned all kinds of things.
Some days I feel like Cliff Clavering. I'm full of shit like that. So off we go.
The different countries switched in one day. The difference is actually the lead time. Sweden took 3 or 4 years, and other countries took 1 or 2.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Thank you. Fabulous. Today we are on the first Thursday of November, which typically means we do a check-in routine. Victoria, I don't think you've been through one of our check-in rounds, so I'll explain the protocol. I am going to not moderate until everybody has checked in only once. We don't want any conversation between the check-ins. Each of us is just going to check in and say what OGM-y thing is on our minds, or have we done, or is like active for us. It's not, the idea is not to sort of dump the whole laundry list of everything you're doing into the call, but rather to pick something that feels exemplifies what you've been up to in some sense. We don't use the chat, and this is difficult, I know, but especially for Pete and for me, who adore following things up with, oh, I found it. Here's, look what the link is. But Pete and I will probably do that privately. And then once everybody has checked in once, we switch back into normal conversational mode. But during the check-in, whoever wants to talk next, raise your hand, or just, if nobody has their hand raised, just step into the call at whenever you're moved to check in. And what am I forgetting about the protocol? I think that's most of it. So try not to engage in conversation during the check-in round. It's just one person at a time. And then just make notes on a piece of paper or in the chat without hitting enter, without hitting return, so it doesn't go to the chat, but make notes about stuff you'd like to talk about when we go back into conversation mode. That's all. There you go. Excellent. So with that, I am going to mute myself and I know what I forgot. During check-in rounds, we like empty space. We like quiet. So it's perfectly fine for us to be still and just hang out with each other, kind of Quaker meeting style. That is a big plus because this is a bit of an antidote to our normally frenzied pace through conversations. That's the thing I forgot.
Jerry, could I just suggest before we go into formal check-in round that silence is not a terrible thing even during a normal call. We might have a little more breath.
Agreed. And I occasionally take us into silence during a normal call, but I often forget for too long. So
I welcome it when you do it.
Thank you. And I love taking groups into silence, and they always welcome it. Everybody's like, oh, okay, good. And you can just see people tune in differently. So it's lovely. Thank you for the reminder, guys. With that, I'm going to mute myself and see who wants to be our first check-in.
I think I'm going to go first. No. So thinking about my personal projects and stuff, I stumbled onto a guy named Kevin MacLeod through a documentary that I haven't watched yet. So Kevin MacLeod has made 2,000 pieces of royalty-free music and made them available under the Creative Commons. He did this he was a composer and decided to start doing this. And as a result, his music has been picked up and used in the backgrounds of countless TikTok videos and Facebook Reels and all that kind of stuff. One of his songs has been played 31.6 billion times. He's the most prolific composer you've never heard of, according to the New York Times. And what it made me think about was the idea of remixability of what you are producing. And instead of making meals, making perhaps ingredients or recipes and things that other people can and want to use to create things that are theirs, as opposed to spending most of my time creating something that's perfect and self-contained and is its own thing, never to be taken apart and given a life of its own through interactions with other people. So that relates to the projects that I've been working on, and it's kind of given me a different sort of perspective on that idea. How can I make the things that I'm doing more remixable by the people who might want to use them? I've talked about my universals set of frameworks, and I've turned them into a little deck that I've been playing around with. And the ability to take several and move them around and recombine them and all of that has changed it for me. And I hope that it's going to make it actually more usable for other people should I publish this. And that's it for me.
Well, I'll go. And I'll confess I'm finding it very hard not to comment on what Scott just said, but I won't. Most OGM thing for me, and Alex will like hearing about this. I've been working on vibe coding, a technique for scrubbing, for automatically de-identifying transcripts of coaching conversations that I'm having with my clients. As most of you know, I'm primarily working these days as an executive coach, excuse me, for CXOs and founders who are purpose-driven. I de-identify the conversations, so I feed them into one of two bots that I've got running, one on Delphi and one that Alex and I have been building custom in the lab, which is more cool and sophisticated. And of course, to use that, I have to get any personal identifying information out of the scheme. I've done that with manual global search and replace for a long time, and now I've got Claude has built me a drag and drop. Finished configuring it yesterday, and today I'll test it on a handful of clients and see how well it does. And if it works well, then we're off to the races. Aside from the specifics of that, it's cool for me to be diving in. This is my first re-entry into the world of coding in like 100 years. And so kind of remarkable what's possible, both out of the box and with the kind of fine tuning that becomes available. I know that a number of you have done way more than me. But that's the OGME report from me for today. And I'm still here, but I'm going to hide because I'm preparing breakfast and you don't want to watch that.
I'm passing today.
I'll go, if I may. Something that surprised me happened this week. I came across this week. Like, sadly, it's going to be an AI thing, but slightly different, I hope. So ever since LLMs have become so powerful, I have set up a number of them where they scan the finance pages and they give me a report every morning. They scan lots of medical things, give me reports, etc. So won't go into it, but I just wanted to know what China was saying. And I repurposed, I've used the same format more or less. I repurposed it so that its task, as I asked it, was to scan all the Chinese or as many Chinese big daily website papers, whatever, and tell me what the Chinese are talking about. Just that. And what I found, cut a long story short, is that I'm using ChatGPT. It would not give me what the Chinese papers are saying without telling me why they're either wrong or this is a true situation or whatever. It was as if inbuilt into the AI is this bit that says, whatever the Chinese say is not true. This is the interpretation that we're giving. And I tried really hard to say to it, do not comment on it. Do not do anything. All I want is a strap line of what they're saying. That is it. And the reason I found it interesting was because in the end I gave up because it just wouldn't do it. The reason I find it interesting is because when DeepSeek came up, which was the Chinese thing, the whole press was saying it's biased towards pro-China stuff. And it was. If you try to do anything politics with it, it would, and particularly Tiananmen Square, it would actually not behave by our standards. But I was surprised to see how, obviously, in my opinion, it's inbuilt into the training data that we have our our biases as well. And more to the point, it's, we talk about AI being safe and whatever, all this. And I was surprised that it's so inbuilt. I could talk about this for a lot further, but basically it just surprised me that our AIs are also quite opinionated in certain directions, particularly that one. So
I'll go. As you may know, I've been using agentic AI assistants for software development for, I don't know, 6, 8 months, probably longer than that. So I've been using Cloud Code, and it works with me about at the level of a human software developer. Agentic means lots of crazy things, and AI means lots of crazy things. But when I say agentic AI is coding assistant, what I mean is something like an LLM, but set up so that it can read and write many files, source code files or text files or whatever. And also, one of the things it does is you can tell it to do something, and it will make a little list for itself. Here's a bunch of to-dos that I need to get Pete's bug fixed or feature implemented or something like that. And then it goes down that list and checks them off and does another thing, checks it off, does another thing. So it takes the LLM experience and kind of up levels it towards an autonomous human kind of level. And I don't mean that it's smart like a human or thoughtful like a human or creative like a human, although it kind of is all of those. So a thing that I've been tracking for a long time is doing the same thing with text, either nonfiction or fiction, having a bot understand like a big chunk of serial fiction, for instance, and being able to write new episodes or going over the whole thing and making a plan for, new volume in a series, something like that. It does that really well. I think it would also work great for a legal team doing a bunch of work with lots of documents, and they kind of all need to fit together and change, together and tell me the overarching meaning of these documents together. Tell me which ones don't quite fit right. How would you rewrite it? Go ahead and try rewriting that and see if I like the draft that you do. No, I don't like that one. Throw it away. Do another one. So nonfiction, big research studies, fiction, legal stuff, anything where you're using a corpus of documents and multiple people. So I've been super excited about this for a while and have a hard time explaining to people why it's cool and why they should be doing it as the same like me. I finally got the first taste of, I've worked with a couple people adopting these tools, and it's kind of a mix of like terror because, there's a lot of overhead to get to be able to work with the tool. It doesn't feel like a lot of overhead to me because software developers built these things, so they built it so it just slots perfectly into a software development thing. And for me, it feels like there's a little bit of a difference between building software and building Obsidian Vault and yada yada and using Git, and it gets more and more complicated kind of. So so the newest one, Cloud Code, now has a web version. You don't have to use your terminal. There's another one called Droid from a company named Factory AI, which also has the web. The web versions also work on mobile kind of. So we're right at the cusp of these things not being where you need a geek to, you don't need to be a geek to use it. However, I've also kind of had it, I was really disappointed in the difficulty with which a non-technical person had to kind of like muscle their way through it. I was watching somebody use it and they were happy, but I could see it was kind of like they had oven mitts on and they were trying to do, fine-grained tasks. So anyway, long story short, I think Cloud Code Web, at least some people are getting a $250 credit. If you go to your Cloud Pro account, it might say you should try Cloud Code Web. Here's $250 for you to spend by November 18th. Droid has another big promotion right now. More people should be doing this, and I'm kind of pulling back from saying everybody should do it right away because it's a little hard. And using the web version is actually even a little bit more hard than the terminal version, I think. It's an easier on-ramp, but it's harder. It's more like molasses or something like that. Everybody's going to be doing this kind of stuff in 18 months, 24 months. You could be doing it today. I would love to show some people how to do that more. Kind of as a coda, one of the things that I've been doing a lot of times from an OGM call, somebody will mention something. I think it was last week, actually, Stacy mentioned something about people in her building working together, and that makes a little society that protects itself from outsiders and things like that. And I said, that reminds me of the broken windows theory. That reminds me of this. That reminds me of that. And so a thing I've been doing for about 6 months is I know there's a bunch of frameworks around a topic. Hey, AI, help me put together a wiki, a 20-page kind of paper / thesis / framework / overview of sometimes things that are a little bit different, that people have kind of been looking at the same part of the world and coming up with different ways to do it, and they don't talk to each other. So the most fun for me is when me and the AI can kind of smash frameworks together that ought to go together but never have before. And so I've been building these 10, 20-page websites like that. Collective efficacy, social cyclic theories, the intention action gap, strategy and management frameworks, governance principles, commons stewardship by communities. And I just do these kind of one-off things, and they're half like amazing, and I've pointed out a couple of them in the OGM list, and half I'm embarrassed by it because it's mostly built by AI. So I'm working with the AIs now to kind of frame that into what is good about these things and what is bad. How do humans work with them? Why is it okay that that the AI has kind of organized things in a way that makes sense? So I'm working on kind of a meta collection of all these things together called Field of Sheaths. Each of these things I'm thinking of as a sheaf. So now I've got 6 or 8 sheaves of whatever these things knowledge together, and so I'm working on that. I'm too embarrassed to release it and yet, but I am working on it. If this is something that's like, oh my gosh, Pete, could I help? Could I do that? Could you help me do one of those myself? I'd love to hear from you. Thanks.
I'll go next quickly. If you guys got the Plex, I think you should. I'm really happy about the 2 people I asked to write for it, and they wrote this one, and I didn't have anything, and I was very happy with it. So that's.
Well, I'll toss in what I've been thinking about. Been playing with the notion of growth. The framework is kind of like, how do I integrate regenerative notions that I've been developing over the last few years, or been that have been emerging, I think, in many spaces in the last few years, into kind of the technocratic public policy background that I've always thought of myself in. And one of the key underlying things is that in the public policy world, we don't really focus on living systems. We may talk about systems, we may, and maybe not often even that. You just talk about optimization and efficiencies and kind of, there's these other values that get get used as proxies for something good, I think. And so you tend to get trapped into making things a little bit better. And rarely can you get to kind of a positive sum outcome abundance kind of notions. And so I've been like, well, how would I retrofit some of that into, the old framings? And, what in another version of that is what can we learn from traditional economics? Like a lot of people kind of want to just throw it away and say economists are fools, and they're funny. I like to make fun of them and stuff, but there's a lot of wisdom in economics too. So I don't think we should toss it away. We should think of it as indigenous knowledge, probably. So what is it? How these two things get together? And one of the core words, anyway, I think, is growth. Traditional economics kind of relies on growth as certainly as one of the answers to, like, if you want to get rid of poverty, how do you get rid of poverty? Well, you grow. So there's that kind of component, but the other is just kind of like economies tend to be robust while they're growing. They tend to get very fragile while they're not. So there's this kind of key frame in there, and living systems are kind of critical. Growth matters a ton to living systems, and so I've just been wondering, like, what are the kinds of growth and the perspectives on growth that would inform kind of traditional economics in a more of a living systems way? And are there kind of examples, basically metaphors that we can take from biological systems around growth that would inform traditional economics in new ways? And for the part of what provoked this was somebody talking about a story of how they had submitted for their Stanford application decades ago. They had to write a review of the book they'd written, and the book that she had written was about the history of sourdough, and how people, like as they were crossing the country, would keep their sourdough alive, and what it would take to keep your sourdough starter alive, and how the women pioneers were keeping the sourdough next to their breast to keep it warm as they crossed the mountains. And I was just thinking about, like, the sourdough being alive and the growth of sourdough as being a metaphor for something. And so that's as far as I've got, and I need to take it to Pete's much smarter AI now to try to evaluate it. But growth, what's the insights can you get from growth?
Yeah, I got an email yesterday from a mailing list, the Union of Concerned Scientists, sending out yet another last urgent warning, and this has been going on for like 3-4 years, and it's from Oregon, actually. Portland, I think Portland State or Oregon State is the hub where they're consolidating the data and explain how we are passing one tipping point after the next, and it will be ignored. It's just yet another alert that people pay attention to, and people who know what it is saying, okay, yeah, I know, and others will dismiss it like it has been done for a really long time. So what is really missing here is a transition to what can you actually do about this, and because there are lots of things we can do if we put our mind to it, but it just doesn't seem to want to work. And of course, what we're doing with our Food with Thought effort here is to engage the neglected part of the market. So you have small to medium-sized farmers, what's called the agriculture of the middle, who can't get into the market. And the reason that is important is because food and agriculture is probably the most damaging part of our interaction with the natural world, destroying watersheds and soils and biodiversity. And so it's incredibly damaging, but it has the capacity to turn that. It has the capacity to recover and to heal and to regenerate. And in the large companies, whether that's Monsanto or Nestle or everybody in there, they're working to automate this. They're working to reduce nitrogen by smart technology, climate smart technology, and hugely capital intensive, even going to exclude more farmers who cannot get into the investment cost required to build these automation, and it's not really necessary. You can absolutely shift into regenerative practices at scale if farmers are being incentivized and paid for. So what we would need to know about it, of course, is a farmer who wants to put in a cover crop and then put his cash crop in needs different pieces of equipment to make that work. Well, they're expensive. Now, so how is a small to medium-sized farmer going to shift into environmental farming, without having the support structure for it? And so what we are arguing as a core point here is there are measurements that make it possible to monitor what a farmer is doing, what the farmer has promised to do. So put a contract out there and then monitor the outputs of that. So there's already some great examples. For example, in the Mississippi River Delta, there are groups of farmers who have been combined to reduce nitrogen runoff into the Mississippi River, which then, of course, runs down into the Gulf of Mexico. Well, that's easy to measure. It doesn't take much to track that. And the incentives have been sufficient enough for those farmers who are very conservative and typically not interested in experimenting a lot. There is just so much money at stake that they are going to do it. And so and there are all kinds of little, like 1 point measurements that have the capacity to shift the entire system. Because in order to reduce the nitrogen runoff, you have to find other ways to fertilize your crop. And so the most basic thing is soil health. So if you have to increase your soil health, now we're talking about putting a cover crop on it. Maybe doing a no-till, maybe rotating your crop into a different type of crop, maybe a perennial or so, in order to do this. So all these other things fall into place. So by building a secondary revenue stream, the farmer now has 2 crops. He has his food crop, and then he has an environmental benefit crop. That comes out that is linked together. So we're saying this is one. I mean, in every industry, there are ways where we could insert ourselves and provide the incentives at scale, to catch the environmental deterioration that is like so obvious in your face now. What we are focusing on is the mostly NGOs, nonprofit, small, medium-sized farms. So, and the reason for that is that if you combine all of the farmers markets and the CSAs, and the low-level output of the sector, it's a single digit of total sales. Last time I checked was like 3% of total sales is if you combine all CSAs, farmers markets, into one together. So to get these farmers into the wholesale market, that's our objective, to assist bundling and aggregating small farmers so they can participate in wholesale markets. So I wrote another newsletter. I mean, I was just thinking about how easy it would be, to really make an impact, and how stubbornly resistant the market is to engage in change.
I've got one small thing and a bigger thing. The small thing is I'm wearing a t-shirt. It's a beautiful day in this neighborhood because April gave a talk in Pittsburgh, and after the talk, she went and visited the Mr. Rogers Museum in Pittsburgh. And Mr. Rogers has a super interesting history, but Mr. Rogers played a really important role in April's childhood. Um, because she had a difficult relationship with her mom, and Mr. Rogers was telling her that she was okay just the way she is, and was one of the few entities that was doing that for her back in the day. And I didn't realize how special that was until we had talked about it some years back. And so it was lovely that she got to visit the museum, and she came back with a road sign that says this is a kindness zone, and it looks exactly like a street sign that you would put in a neighborhood. And we're going to put it up on the wall here. So that's kind of cool. So that's tiny. Then separately, I've been reading Dan Brown's latest potboiler, The Secret of Secrets. And there'll be a tiny plot spoiler in what I say now. So if you really, really, really want to read written book, because Brown is not Faulkner. But one thing I love about Brown is from the Da Vinci Code, I picked up in, 2/3 of the way through the book, he has this thesis about the marginalization of the divine feminine. And I think I've told this story here before, but I love that thesis. And I read Leonard Schlane's book, The Alphabet versus the Goddess, within a couple months of the Da Vinci Code. And it has the same thesis in an academic work from a completely different perspective. And I had been chasing the word consumer for already a couple decades then. And I had gotten to the same place myself, thinking about yin and yang and a bunch of other stuff, all of which is a longer story. But all those three stories kind of clicked in my head in a really wonderful way. And I'm like, oh, and now I start reading Dan Brown. And one of the major plot points of The Secret of Secrets is non-local consciousness. And that snapped together with what Sunil Malhotra, a friend of OGM's, had said to me, I don't know, a year and a half ago. He basically said, hey, and I mentioned it on an OGM call somewhere. He said, hey, Jerry, what if consciousness isn't a thing that materializes out of neurons in our heads when we have some kind of funny critical mass of neurons and activity? But what if consciousness is the background radiation of the universe and we occupy it? We snap in, we tune into it like a radio station. And then when we die, we sort of leave it or meld back into it, something like that. And that really sort of changed the way I look at things. And then by reading Dan Brown, I realized I had already put non-local consciousness in my brain from a completely different bit of research, and that it was the same general idea, that consciousness is in fact not a materialistic phenomenon of something that's happening in the chemistry in our heads, but is in fact a much broader thing. A thing I like, which gets you into woo-woo noetic science territory, which I'm beginning to respect a lot more. So one of the interesting things in the plot point is that, Tuesday night I stop someplace and have a meal and keep reading in the book, and I get to the point where they talk about GABA, the basically inhibitor receptor in our heads. GABA is gamma aminobutyric acid, GABA, or GABA, and it appears to be the primary inhibitor in our neural system, which means that high levels of GABA keep us from being overwhelmed by the world's stimuli. And when you have low GABA, you're suddenly like, you take in a whole lot more. And apparently, one of the mechanisms of epilepsy is a precipitous drop in GABA, which then causes your brain to be overwhelmed and you go into seizure. Epileptics, when they come back out of a grand mal seizure, have moments of bliss, of like, connection with the infinite. And then they sort of reboot their brains back into being online with the usual constraints and filters on and everything else. And then she's the protagonist's other half, who's part of the plot, says, have you ever done like hallucinogens? They seem to reduce your GABA levels so that you can perceive what's always happening around you. It's not that they generate a hallucination in your head. It's that they lower your filters so that you can see what's going on around you. Which was all very funny because yesterday afternoon, I had my first psilocybin journey ever, which in fact, for me, is my first trip ever. I've never done drugs. And a friend of mine in the neighborhood hosted me at his place. It was incredibly safe and lovely. He's completely trustworthy. It was great, and I had a phenomenal experience. I felt connected to like the mycelial networks of the world. He had grown the shrooms himself. You can order kits, et cetera, et cetera. It works fine. He had tested it on himself, so he knew it was going to be good. And I was really transformative. I had an incredible experience, and I'm still processing it. I tried during the experience to leave myself little doors or handles or gateways to step back into the experience without doing the whole shroom thing. I don't know if that's going to work. But I had many different things happened. I felt like I was everything all at once ish. I now understand special effects and in movies a lot better because they're basically just like copying what happens to you when you see everything and trying to map that into graphics and visuals. But the overwhelm you feel in the moment is not easily replicable in a movie theater when you're sitting staring at a screen far away and you know that there's no immediate consequences to you. Anyway, I feel like I'm transformed a bit. I don't know how, but it was thrilling. And with that, I'm complete.
Well, Jerry, I'll step up and I had 1,700 different ways to go this week, but I'll start with where you left off. It is gratifying to know that I am not the only person from the West Coast who has never done a trip of any type. I haven't even smoked a cigarette, which goes to show you how I did a total bypass past adolescence. When I joined the Clinton administration in January 1993, we all had to get security clearances, and in my case, at a pretty high level. And of course, they have the people interviewing you. And because it was the Clinton administration and we had a whole bunch of people in their late 20s and early 30s, the first question was, okay, how often have you done drugs? And are you still doing them? And I said, well, no, I never done drugs. And they just refused to believe this because and not only were every other person they'd interviewed had done drugs in college, and several of them were doing drugs currently and actually had to go on some kind of withdrawal plan and had to be tested every couple of weeks to make sure they were on it. I didn't know how much they didn't believe me until I had 2 random drug tests in the next 10 days. But apparently, they chose to believe me, or maybe they just talked to somebody else who had worked with me when I was working with Gore in the Senate, and they were assured that, yeah, Mike Nelson, if there's anybody in the Clinton administration who hasn't done drugs, it's Mike Nelson. But anyway, I am going to riff on what you said about avoiding overstimulation, because the topic I was going to lay out there is how I am feeling completely, absolutely, intellectually, politically overstimulated. This is partly because I spent Saturday at TEDx Mid-Atlantic, and we had some very powerful talks by everyone from Joe Trippi to Michael McFaul, our former ambassador to Russia, to a rapper in DC who has sort of reinvented the business model. He signed up with a major studio. He was doing cool stuff with other cool rappers, and he was going all over the country. And he said, forget this. And he started Front Porch. And he just goes out on his front porch and he gets guests to come by and they do things and the neighborhood loves it. And not as lucrative, but a lot less exhausting. So just one example of some of the wild ideas that came out. But I've also just been overstimulated by the politics of what's happened in the last 3 days. Here in Virginia, of course, we've gotten a lot more political advertising than most. You've all seen that one of my favorite former Congress people, Abigail Spanberger, got elected. We've known her personally for about 6 years, and she's very close with one of our best friends. So we're just delighted that a moral, decent, smart, kind person could, and a young person, become our new governor. Virginia's blessed. We have a term limit system. You only get to be governor for one 4-year term. And as a result, there's a lot of focus on building talent and being sure there's several choices. But we won the governorship, lieutenant governor, and attorney general, which is going to be incredibly important given all the lawsuits that we're going to have to file against the Trump administration. But most importantly, we went from having a one-person majority for the Democrats in the legislature to having a 14-seat majority. So it's, like 52% to 61%, something like that. And around the country, we had other very impressive landslide victories. So it's clear that people are fed up with what Mr. Trump has been doing. In some cases, they're also saying they're fed up with what the Democrats are doing, but they know that the Democrats are unable to get organized and therefore unable to do as much damage as Trump and his minions. I'm also tracking a lot of technology developments around the world, and that's, again, overstimulating. There's just too much going on. The Chinese are pushing forward a digital identity system, which they're going to try to get other countries, or at least multinationals, to use. Clearly, that's going to have surveillance built in, so you're not going to be able to go anonymously from service to service on the internet. The Internet Engineering Task Force was meeting this week, and one of the most lively debates was about a new authentication system for digital transactions, and also a tool that would allow a website to prevent people from coming and scraping all the content on the website. And this led to a lot of interest and discussions about, well, can McDonald's use this to make sure that Burger King can't go on its website and find out what its prices are, or what its sales are by store? I mean, it's really, it's a good thing, because you do have these companies, these bots that are scraping content and looking for a stray social security number, and they're just putting a huge demand on all these websites, including nonprofit ones. So, but how do you stop a bad person from abusing the openness of the internet while allowing a researcher to span 100,000 websites and go search through terabytes of data? Tough, tough, tough issues. And we're having all these discussions, but they're all kind of below the radar because we're all fixated on whether AI will destroy world civilization. So I've been overstimulated. I don't know if I've stimulated you, but I am intrigued by your experience and this promise of finding a way to turn off the brain a little bit. I usually do that by going for long bike rides, which is my next thing. And I have to say, we have had more than a week of spectacular weather. It is peak, peak, peak fall foliage here in Washington, and I'm trying to enjoy that. Being semi-retired, I can enjoy that. But yeah, there's so much going on, and I'd urge you to check out the Carnegie Endowment website, some of the sessions that we've had over the last 2 weeks on everything from information ecology, a book by one of my colleagues, to a session I just listened to on the radical right and the New World Order. I mean, it's just a lot of big thinking going on, a lot of change happening, which of course could mean that we could have an improvement. Nelson's law of life is that nothing improves unless it changes. Murphy's corollary to Nelson's law is that not every change is an improvement. But I'm going to try to help push people in the direction of improvement. Thank you. Long, somewhat optimistic screed.
I really don't know what to say after all your check-ins, because I have just been writing my novel, researching about how people seek certainty, and attending a workshop to which now I have a session, so I will have to leave early, in which I am observing a curious thing. If people doesn't have curiosity, even if they are adults, willingly engaged in a workshop. They say they are interested in learning something, but in the end, when in the community side, I post some questions or some things to trigger conversations, nobody responds. And as a former, what's the name? Because sometimes I have been designing courses for companies and everything. So for me, it's incredible how curiosity is dropping in our world. So this is one of the things I'm also like taking notes about and trying to understand. But I'm not as engaged as you are in all those great things and experiences. So that's my little check-in.
Can I use my check-in to answer Victoria? Since I didn't check in?
No.
I can't.
Although Victoria's going to drop off the call at the top of the hour, so she won't hear you if you do it later. So yes.
Okay. Thank you for rethinking.
Yeah.
I would love to answer your question about how I approach certainty, if you're interested, because I'm really clear on how I do it. I think of every story as being there's two truths and a lie in it. So I'm always, that helps me to keep an open mind, and I'm always trying to figure out which is the lie. So it's a constant process of, well, it could be that or it could be this. And that's how I keep going every step of the way. So I just wanted to share that.
Thanks, Stacy. We now return to our regular program, which is already in progress. And we have a couple people who haven't checked in yet.
So I'll go next. So this is sort of zooming way in and zooming way out at the same time. So at the tender age of 69, as an ADD person, my executive function is finally fully matured. And with that, I have found a huge expansion of capacity, capability to grapple with things and play with things and do things and use things that, were opaque and impenetrable and unusable before. So one of the phenomena of my daily reality up until about a week ago was 4 to 5 browser windows with 3 monitors, each one with 45 to 50 tabs. And because on one hand, that was my way of having things up that I didn't want to lose. Of course, when you have 250 tabs that you can't see because they're microscopically small, you can't differentiate. It's not as if you can find anything that way either. But emotionally, they're there. They exist. And so approaching your computer first thing in the morning with that was always not fun. It was always like this overwhelming crap. Like, what do I do now? And and I was thinking about, browser functionalities, and I saw something that sort of flashed that I knew the capability had to be in there, but I didn't know what it was called or where to find it. And then I noticed in a menu something called tab groups. And it was like, okay, I think this is my path to emancipation, to tab emancipation. And because of newly vested executive function, I was able to like open it up and learn it and master it very, very quickly. And I was able to take those 250 tabs and sort and bucket them into groups. And I was able to then close those groups. And then I was able to close the browser windows of those groups and freed up my machine's resources. And all of a sudden, like my computer, my poor little laptop that I was asking, mini computer demands on, was able to function again. And like things started to flow, and I could close all that stuff and only have the 1 or 2 tab groups up that were relevant in that moment to actually do work and not be in overwhelm. This is life-changing for someone like me. And pulling way, 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 way out. Goes under the heading in my, working reality of the most meaningful questions for me in terms of what am I devoting my attention to, what am I engaging with, and why, is based on the belief that every human being has value to add and contribute. And the only meaningful operative question inquiry, if you buy that, is what do each one of those individuals need in order to be enabled to contribute? And then the third and closing inquiry is, based on that, how do we meet everyone's needs? And pretty much everything else, if it is not germane to those inquiries, is substantially irrelevant. So that's the zooming out. So I found what I needed in tab groups. It unleashed a flood tide of capacity, of organizing, of moving into action, of unleashing the hounds in all sorts of ways. And now I'm going to close with the immediate nexus that OGM represents in my world. So what's starting to happen is I'm touching a bunch of projects that a lot of you are familiar with because they're projects of OGM people or people that have dipped in and out of here. And they're starting to cross-connect via individuals and conversations. They're starting to coalesce where, two completely independent projects have managed to connect, and all of a sudden they're talking, and I have awareness of the one, and I have awareness of the other, and I have awareness of how they complement and fit into a larger context. And I'd say 60% of them, there's a list of about 12, 60% of them all have OGM in common. So Jerry, a hat tip for being, the energetic center of gravity, out of which a lot of these things, for me, were connected with and met and now coalesceable in some fashion that I have yet to know completely, but that I'm working on. So anyway, with that, I'm complete.
Rick, I don't know if you're just listening in or if you want to step in, but I don't want to hold up our transition to conversation. So I'm going to pause a moment. Am I missing anybody else? Did somebody else not go? We're all set. Good.
Yeah, I'll
There's
pass, Jerry. Go ahead.
okay. Thanks, Rick. We are now officially in conversation mode. Excellent. Mike took that cue instantaneously and put the Carnegie calendar onto the chat, which I was going to ask you to do. So fabulous. Thank you so much. And anybody, we've got like four hands up immediately. Okay, so Mike, you're first.
Well, I not only acted immediately, I jumped the gun with my hand, but one of the issues I didn't raise, and this is weighing on me a great deal. Our library at Carnegie gets the Wall Street Journal. I used to subscribe to it, but the fact that it's owned by Murdoch makes it morally ambiguous to support his profits. But I do like to support the journalists, and I do try to publicize the great articles that I read. From the hard copy that we have at our library, every day for the last 3 weeks, there's been at least one article along the lines of, "Oh my God, it's an AI bubble," and different versions on why it is. It's been clear to me for at least 2 years that we're on this track. It's so reminiscent of what happened with Time Warner and being bought by AOL. I mean, OpenAI is the AOL of our day, has a completely overinflated stock price, and Altman's doing exactly the right thing and using it to buy all sorts of, do all sorts of deals, which are going to not look very good in a year or two. But this bubble is going to deflate either in a few weeks or in a few years. It's clear we're not going to maintain the kind of growth that we've seen from NVIDIA and some of these other companies. And the question I have for anybody here who has the courage to give financial advice, is it going to drag down just the AI related companies, or is it going to drag down the entire tech sector, or is it going to drag down the entire market? One of the articles in the Wall Street Journal was the US economy is now AI. It made the point that all of the growth that we've seen in more than 12 months is because of all the investment that's going into these data centers. I mean, if you just take that out, the economy has been flat, and Trump is doing everything he can to make it go down. So my question, because I was very lucky, I was employee number 130 at Cloudflare before it went IPO. A good chunk of my retirement portfolio is still in Cloudflare stock, and other parts of my portfolio are in IBM stock and other tech companies, because I tend to invest in what I know. So I'm just curious, I mean, how many of you are thinking of pulling out the profits from your tech investments? That's an easy question. And if you are, what in the hell do you put the proceeds into? I mean, I just, I have no clue what a good strategy here is. I mean, the reason gold is up by a factor of 3 is a lot of other people are confused too, and they figure, well, okay, I'll put it in something that will somehow have value someday. We've never, I don't remember a discussion like this, and maybe that's because people don't like to talk finances and people have, or because people have very good financial advisors. I have a very good financial advisor, but and he's got, some suggestions, but I'm just curious that how many of you are thinking of strategies for the upcoming bubble.
Thanks, Mike. And we're not a financially oriented group or that necessarily expert in this. There's probably different depths of expertise in the group on that, but it might make a good topic for a call. Like, is there a bubble? What is the bubble? And I haven't had a chance to read all the too many articles about, oh my God, there's a bubble. But a couple of them are trying to unpack. There could be several different bubbles going on, and here's how they fit and relate, which I find really fascinating because I think there's clearly a bubble in a piece of it. There's like this frenzy to do AGI, but there's other parts that are not so bubbly, and I don't know. It's a really good, juicy, complex issue. And I haven't even addressed do you divest all tech? The problem with previous bubbles is if you heeded the first warnings of, oh my God, we're in a bubble, you would miss the actual big run up, and you would sell too early. And then if you miss the fall, because usually it's the first couple people who get off the merry-go-round who profit a lot, then you lose everything. So timing is everything in these things, and it's a little nutty. So
yeah, well, this was meant to be a 2-minute discussion.
yeah,
and it really is kind of put your hand up if you think there is a bubble, and then put your other hand up if you're going to try to dramatically reduce your exposure in the tech, not dramatically, but significantly reduce your exposure in the tech sector. And if you have a one-sentence answer to where would you put your money, you can put that in the chat.
Let's do that. Raise your hand if you think there's a bubble.
I think there's 3 bubbles. There's one in cloud computing, one in AI chips, and then one in cryptocurrency, that's a whole nother topic.
Cool. And then raise your hand if you're seriously thinking about disinvesting, changing your investment strategy.
Oh,
cool.
Okay. 3.5. That's thank you. That's very helpful for reducing my anxiety a little bit.
and it's a great question, Mike. Thank you.
And is pork bellies the place I should put all my money?
No, try Rye Coins. I put a Wikipedia link in the chat. It's the big stones they used to use as currency. I think you need to find one of those and like roll it around the living room as your asset.
I thought that was the island of Yap.
That could well be.
It's the future.
There's also the guy, Mike, behind the Big Short in the real estate crash, who has a fund who is set up to short the tech sector. Like, just if you want to go straight contra, like he'd be happy to take your money.
Is it Michael Burry or
Michael Burry?
Yeah.
And if you haven't seen,
that is him. Shit! Wow. Okay.
If you haven't seen the interview,
he's back.
Wow.
If you haven't seen the interview with the CEO of Palantir, Karp was interviewed about the fact that Burry had shorted Palantir a lot.
And
he looked panicked. It was like, oh, this is really bad. Oh, this is not fair. Oh. And his stock price went down 12%. So
deer in the headlights.
So I've got a New Yorker article that's titled "Michael Burry, Real Life Market Genius from the Big Short, Thinks Another Financial Crisis is Looming," dated 2016. So he would have missed a decade of run up.
Yep.
And if I don't know when you run out of money from shorting, but you do at some point. That was part of the problem with The Big Short. And by the way, The Big Short movie and book are among my favorite bits of media like that. They're just so insightful. Yep. Gil, please.
And the guy who wrote The Big Short has done a series of books of similar depth and insight. Really terrific. What's Michael somebody?
Michael Lewis.
Michael Lewis lives here in Berkeley.
He did Moneyball as well.
Moneyball and a bunch of things. Yeah, brilliant guy. I just first want to say what a fine bunch of humans you all are. It's been a fascinating call, just listening to the quick summaries from everybody. Couple of things. Mike, I think I heard you say that when to get out is obvious, and obviously it's not obvious.
I didn't say
For the reason that Jerry said, because bubbles and FOMO are the kind of similar phenomenon. You know, I mean, how can tech go higher, but you can't miss out on it going higher? Same with gold, same with Bitcoin. There's this weird psychological thing in there. Um, golly, a couple of pieces here I want to tie together. I've mentioned Ben Hunt before from Epsilon Theory. He's now launched a new site called panoptica.ai, which I encourage people to take a look at. Ben and his partner, Rusty Gwynn, have been tracking narratives globally. They've built AIs that scan, I don't know, Alex, this is to your point about media scans, scanning 8,000 sites around the world on a regular basis and distilling the trends of what's being talked about. So they have multicolored complex graphs showing the rise and fall of conversations about things like bubbles or bubbles in this or that, recession, interest rates, and so forth. It's a fascinating meta view on the stories that power the world. Ben also runs an asset management company called Second Foundation Partners. He is a confessed longtime short, shorted the real estate bubble back in 2008. And so, you know, can somebody be a short for a long time? Maybe so. The Panoptica site also has got a wealth of articles and analysis and so forth, really fascinating stuff, very much of it very OGM-y. So have a look at that. On the filters in the news scan, just to note that not just Panoptica, but our very own Marshall Kirkpatrick has been building a system that does that, focused around sustainability and regeneration. Doing scans of trends, building products for companies around that. Some very interesting stuff in the workbench there. Marshall's rarely on these calls, but he's up to some interesting stuff on that. And the other thing I want to say about AI is that I was spent Tuesday at Capgemini, the French consultancy. I've been working with them on their net positive, excuse me, net positive projects, which the company appears to have made a major commitment to. We've just gone through the second year of training, each year like a cohort of 100 Hispanic background managers and executives in sustainability and net positive. Fascinating process, planting seeds in hundreds of companies about that. But Tuesday we had a presentation from a guy named Andres Sjoborn, who was, I think, their lead or one of their leads on AI. And it was a fascinating hour-long overview of the field and how he sees it and the kind of integrations that companies are doing in applications of AI. I've asked him for the slides. I don't know if they're publicly available. If I do get them, I'll share them here. But might be somebody to track. And one other thing here. Two other things here. David, really intrigued to hear your discussion about growth and your evolution around the conversation that you're in. You and I have intersected on a little bit of, and I'd love to talk with you more about that. Because I think as we go into, when we look at the biological roots of the world that we live in, a lot of our human stories don't hold up very well. I'll just leave it at that for now and talk more about that another time. Well, I'll say one other thing. Even like our current widespread irateness about what we call corruption, which maybe is not that different from predator-prey relationships and parasite relationships and the things that living systems do, just as kind of part of the game. You know, there's a striving for advantage and there's a countervailing opposition to the advantage, and that may just be what it is. And so, not to say we shouldn't resist corruption, but we maybe should not be quite as surprised and outraged and hopeful of a world without it, given that. And the other thing I just wanted to comment on from the top of the call, Scott, I was fascinated by what you talked about the Kevin MacLeod and being the most widespread. Did we lose Scott? Oh gosh, too bad.
No, Scott's still on the call.
Okay.
He's muted and no video, but
he's hidden. Yeah, I'm not seeing the video. Okay.
Yep.
So it just echoed for me the line from whoever it was. Somebody here knows about it's amazing what you can get done if you're not concerned with getting credit for it.
Yeah.
And so I was thinking about Kevin MacLeod and Scott's deck and other decks that I've seen other people do, and the thought about revolutionary Legos, like building the pieces of the puzzle and just throwing them out there in a way where they self-propagate, like apparently Kevin MacLeod's been able to do, rather than trying to build complete strategies, but to feed the development of multiple strategies around the world. It's an intriguing idea that resonated very powerfully from what Scott said. So Scott, thank you for that. And I'll be chewing on that for a while. I'm complete.
Thank you. There's a bunch of stuff. Klaus, please.
Yeah, I mean, it's also AI related, but I've been running into a really interesting phenomena where every part of the economy is working to integrate AI into their flow. But when you are talking with NGOs and particularly in my food and agriculture space, there is almost an emotional rejection of wanting to deal with AI. And the reasons given is it uses too much electricity, is the first thing you hear. It uses water. But there has been, and I'm now thinking, how can something like this penetrate so effectively into an entire sector? Because these opinions are being held pretty universally, and it disempowers nonprofit groups from engaging with this technology, which is so powerful. I mean, I can do a search. I mean, David just asked a question about the Bill Gates Foundation. It took me like 5 seconds to find this, because my AI is customized into these particular topics. So we now have a relationship with the Schumacher Institute, and George Poor is taking it on to work with the Open Global Food System. It's a nonprofit group, operates in 20 countries, and they're working with food hubs now, and they're in this small CSA farmers markets type of environment, and we are going to track them into the AI world. With 2 objectives. One is to get them into wholesale markets, and the other one is to get farmers paid for environmental services. And I already know it can be done. I mean, I've done the basic research with the AI to figure this out. And here in Oregon, the Oregon Community Foundation, which is a $20 billion foundation, has also agreed to work with me. And so I have a meeting next week where the director wants to set up a conversation with a catering organization, the hospital group catering director, and see how could we do this. And so just to make this incredible technology available, to support these industries and to build a bridge. I mean, you really have to see yourself as a translation service, because all the knowledge is already out there, but to track these groups in. And I must say the effectiveness with which NGOs have been neutralized from using AI and working with it is just stunning. I don't know who came up with this idea of emphasizing this discussion around don't use it, it's bad for the environment, but it sure worked, and it's taking a lot of effort to overcome that rejection.
Thanks, Klaus. Rick, please.
Maybe bounce off of that, because I've had conversations with academics who have this anti-AI mindset for the environmental, et cetera, reasons. And I just had one with a colleague of mine who's a professor of global studies at UNC about this very issue. We talked about that last breakfast coffee meeting. And one of the things I'm absolutely fascinated with, and I'm trying to develop my own skills, is the whole notion of co-intelligence, not just from an individual level, but from a collective perspective, which touches on Klaus's point, because what you're able to do and achieve is mind-blowing. I'm just blown away by what you can do. But what I've been working on for some time, and I've dropped it here and there in different places, is trying, and I mentioned this phrase before, and I remember Mike saying, keep it simple, about HEN, which is, humanist guided, AI enabled, emancipatory neo-learning. And I've made some little vignettes explaining that, what HEN means. And, we live in this incredible culture of indoctrination, and it's so pervasive that the point that you put in your little chat there, Mike, about curiosity, I mean, to me, curiosity is the most fundamental skill and inquiry skills that we need to have to be able to mitigate against the pervasive forces of neoliberalism, reductionist indoctrination, yada, yada. And I'll just share something which is still work in progress. And it's about how to create emancipatory learning communities and developing learning assets that stimulates people's curiosities and inquiries to ask even better questions and more complex questions, or compound questions, I should say. And that's the beauty about AI, is that you can, I mean, we have a reductionist mindset to questioning, and we frame it, we whatever. Well, in a compound philosophical question, you can put everything in the kitchen sink in there and see what comes out, and then you can go back and see patterns that you would, or even come across a new concept you've never heard of before. And we've all done that sort of stuff. And the question is, how can we create, an environment where people can learn how to become open-minded, truth-seeking, virtuous free thinkers, so that we can mitigate against, well, the propaganda that we're bombarded with on a regular basis. Anyway, I'll share something in the chat for those who are curious about it. It's still work in progress, and I still feel like I've got some ways to go in terms of how to create learning communities around this, which are designed to be more group-centered and based on principles of sociocracy and whatever. So I'll put it in the chat. So I just think the opportunities for co-intelligence is just, Klaus, I concur with you. Let's up our skills. How can we learn from each other more effectively about how to do that? So thanks.
Thanks, Rick. Alex.
Right, Mike, I'll make it easy for you for your investment conundrum. And it goes like this. I'm the world's worst possible investor. I have always sold when I should have bought, and bought when I should have sold. So a few years back, and quite a few years back, I made the really great decision to keep 40% of my money in cash, pure cash, because obviously the market's going to crash. And it's still there. And I haven't yet bought into the market. But as soon as I'm tempted and I buy the market, I will actually let all of you know that I've done it, because that is the time to get out of it. But so far, I have not done that.
So the critical question is it cash in dollars or cash in Swiss francs?
It's cash that's losing its value wherever you are.
except if you'd put it in Swiss francs. We were just
yes.
Yeah.
No, I didn't put it there.
Well, thank you, Alex. This is what the reason I ask is I am in the same category you are. I have sold shares that went on to increase in value by a factor of 6.
There's a few nightmare stories behind that, but so that was, I just want to point that out. The other thing is, Pete, I'm interested in the sheaf methodology. I'd love to get in touch with you. And one more, someone said something. Oh, and Doug, a long time ago, a year ago, we spoke about a game you wanted. Do you remember that conversation? Let's get together, because I can show you how to do it yourself, given all these AI things that we've spoken about. You won't even have to, you don't even need me. I just need to show you. But Pete can, and everybody can, really. That's it.
Would love that. Thank you.
Cool. Thank you much, Pete.
Real quick, I put some of it in the chat, and I feel like I didn't express it very well. But Mike, your question is really interesting about whether we're in a bubble. I think we've been in a bubble since about the PC era, more or less. It's one big tech bubble inflation thing going on. It goes up and down, but the whole thing is going big and changing the world and changing us. AI feels like some kind of end game. Either it's going to usher in, amazing productivity and social justice and everything is going to be wonderful, or the whole thing is going to crash hard because we've turned all matter into GPUs or something, right? I think what's really going to happen is some weird thing in the middle, but it's hard to say this out loud to professional people who care, but it feels like we're kind of post, what do I do the market? Do I do cash? Do I do gold? Do I do Bitcoin? All of that seems like the wrong questions at this point. So when we said, are we in a bubble? And I go like this, it's like we're past where we've ever even thought about bubbles, where they go. We're in weird territory here. So I think that's kind of what to discuss.
We're sort of in too big to fail territory, and I've seen a couple articles there too, which is like this has eaten so much of the economy that this is called the government put or something like that, where you get to a scale where you can just keep plowing ahead confidently because the government's going to backstop you somehow, and you'll wind up okay.
Now we put AI instead of, AI is going to backstop you. Will it? Won't it? Maybe that will be great, but we won't be able to eat because, as Klaus has told us, we need to figure out fast how to apply AI to actually growing things and delivering food and making soil regenerative and all that stuff. So it's a weird place.
Absolutely. Thank you. Gil, you may have the last word. Actually, no, Doug's going to have the last word. So go ahead, Gil.
Well, let me try to be fast. There's room for Doug. So, golly, I had a thing to say, but Pete, what you said, it's not like we need AI to figure out how to grow food regeneratively. We actually know how to do that. And many of our problems are not technology problems. They're social organization and ownership problems. But that's a conversation for another time. AI and bubbles, I mean, it's not one big bubble, it's a series of bubbles. Some of them have stabilized, some of them have not. The backstopping, in 2008, the government bailed out some of the banks and not others. This is the whole too big to fail game, and we're in another one of those now. Jerry, to your point, the numbers I hear from Ben Hunt are that the tech sector, which is about 5% of GDP, is now pouring more money into the economy than the consumer sector, which is about 30% of GDP. And that's the only thing keeping the economy afloat at this point. And so, will something...
And masking the effects of tariffs or whatever else might be happening. It's totally swamping all that other stuff.
For the moment. And so that's somebody's on a pumping that bubble to keep that afloat. There's that. On the data center footprint question, which you've talked about a bunch before, it's not just turning AI to solve the problems of agriculture. We're turning AI to design the data centers of the future. And it turns out that Microsoft has been doing that over the last 8 years or so. There's a book out just now by Joanne Garvin called Innovation at Microsoft. She led the Data Center of the Future project, and they've designed data centers that are net zero energy and net zero water. Are they building them? Doesn't seem to be. And I don't know if anybody is yet, but at least there's that as a theoretical possibility, not just for data centers, but potentially for everything if we chose to go that way. But again, it's not can we do it technically, it's will we do it politically, economically, financially, and so forth. Last, back to Mike's question about where do I move the money if I'm taking it out of tech and gold and Bitcoin and so forth. My financial advisor and just about every smart financial, who I'm calling a smart financial advisor I've spoken to, says, find your asset allocation strategy and stay there. And I periodically go back to my guy and say, well, shouldn't we be moving some money here? He says, no, no, just allocate and stay there and rebalance periodically. And that's the way that you move tech profits into other sectors. The one place where I'm disagreeing with him, I think, is that I think we should be much more offshore than we are now. Diversify out of the United States into international much more than we are now, just because of the instability of here. So that's how I'm thinking about it.
Too bad this group's got nothing to say.
I just drove Mike off the screen by saying that. Oh my God.
No. Doug, your hand is down, but that might have been accidental.
I just wanted to throw in, and this is empirical, that the rate at which energy technology, battery technology, quantum computing, and the rest are progressing, these massive billion-dollar data center investments are obsolete in 18 months. How does it make sense? Like, just on a intuitive, logical level, it doesn't make sense. It's got to blow up. You know, when it's too good to be true, it just doesn't. It defies reality. And when the biggest players in the world are canning 30, 40, 50,000 people to divert resource to constructing data centers, that's the end. That's not the beginning of the end. That's not a bubble. That's the end of whatever this has been. It's sort of reached its insane logical conclusion as a capitalist, you know, train run amok.
Well, we only need
So
$7 trillion and we can push right through that little eye of the needle and get into the singularity. Don't you want that?
So yeah, I don't know what's after that, but I do know what's ending. Thank God. Like, it needed to go away. We need to do us differently and better if we're not going to go extinct.
Jerry,
This conversation does not want to go extinct either. Go ahead, Alex.
Sorry, Doug mentioned a couple of things that were really interesting. So I was in the throes of the blockchain temperature in 2015 or thereabouts. NVIDIA shares skyrocketed because they were making the cards that were being used by the people that were mining Bitcoin and all the good things. And the prices went up. But what actually happened, Doug, and this is interesting what you said, is that the technology was moving so quickly that the graphics cards they were producing became obsolete, exactly as you said, within 18 months. So what happened, there was a backwash in the market of very good cards, which were useful for games. So there was a secondhand market of, whilst they were building the latest ones. So it's just reminded me of this situation where all these data centers that are going to become obsolete, maybe they will produce cheap alternative computing power for something. What that something is, I have no idea, but I just thought I'd mention it.
Thank you very much. Okay, let's take a deep breath and then we can close out this call. We have several different topics proposed for future calls, really juicy ones. So I'll pick from among those. And I thank you very much. This has been delightful.
Yep.
Let's be careful out there.